Well, we were just talking about the downgrades, the price target cuts. One of the firms downgrading Lyft today is Wedbush. Now, in a note to clients, a firm writing Lyft, quote, faces an Everest-like uphill climb. And joining us now is the analyst behind that call. We want to bring in Dan Ives, the Wedbush managing director and senior equity analyst. Dan, it's great to have you there. There you go, the Eagles jersey. I love it. Go Birds!
Miles Sanders fly, Eagles fly.
I know, but we can do the chant at the end of the interview.
You can lose the sport coat, brother. Just show the jersey, man. I mean, you have permission.
All right, Dan, let's talk about Lyft. We got to get to the business part of it, and then we got to have some fun here. Right? You're downgrading the stock from outperform. You downgraded it to neutral. Cut your price target to $13 a share. Now, in your note, you say that in 22 years on the street, you've listened to thousands of conference calls, earnings calls, and, quote, last night's Lyft call was a top 3 worst call you've ever heard. Why?
Well, I mean, it was an embarrassment. I mean, this is a management team that feels like they're playing darts blindfolded in terms of trying to figure out how they're going to get the profitability, what the strategy is. And that's why I think investors came off. I mean, this is a name, besides just being a little brother to Uber, it just shows that I think the business model has some significant uphill climb in terms of what the future is. And I was just going to, on Amazon, send a compass to the Lyft management team.
Wow, solid. Okay, Lyft CEO Logan Green discussed the company's Q1 outlook on that call that you so loved. Let's listen to a clip here.
We expect this will result in Q1 adjusted EBITDA between 5 and 15 million. This is obviously not the level of growth or profitability we are aiming for or capable of, and we are laser focused on driving additional growth and managing costs. Relative to 3 months ago, the competitive dynamics changed, and the better marketplace balance we see today creates significant opportunities for long-term growth.
All right, we'll dive more into the numbers, but what so turned you off about this call?
Well, there's no strategy. In other words, how are you going to do that profitably? And how could Uber, and clearly different levers globally and as well as delivery, be in such a different situation than Lyft? Essentially, there's adults in the room at Uber, and there aren't any at Lyft. And that's the biggest problem here. The street, especially in this macro, I mean, they're going to throw this out the window. And I think outside of M&A, that would be the best case, which I think there's far and few between. But then strategically, what's the path here? Where is Lyft in 2-3 years? That's why, as an analyst, I listened to that conference call. That was a Friday the 13th nightmare for anyone. You cannot come out of that bullish.
Friday the 13th nightmare. I love that, Dan. When you talk about M&A, that might be the most likely, or what you think would be the smartest, maybe path forward is a better way to put it, for Lyft at this point. Who do you think would be a potential buyer? And I know you kind of alluded to this, but do you think there's any appetite out there for Lyft right now?
Look, I don't think necessarily the appetite, and also if you're a buyer out there, you'll wait for this stock to just continue to move down and wait for that board to take the phone call. I think it would probably be a financial buyer, if I was thinking about it, that could basically just crush costs and ultimately integrate this. There is clearly an install base and ecosystem that you could tap into, but that's the shame. I mean, look, 24 hours ago, we had hopes that Lyft would be able to get through this profitably, understand the market, make the tough decisions. Instead, it was almost just a call you came out of there feeling like, they don't really understand the strategy. And it's hard for any investor to have faith in that. And it contrasts so dramatically with Uber. And I think that it's just a startling change between those two.
So who would be a sector fit in terms of complementary, what they like to do if that stock falls enough? I mean, would it be a travel company? Would it be a tech company? Would it be a Tesla type company?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think domestic. It would have to be an international player that plays an overall gig ride sharing, that's looking to potentially get into the US. And they would, and that would obviously be Lyft with a duopoly. And it would give them some sort of spear to get into the market. I think that from a strategic would probably be best case. But right now, look, they're basically hoping for a glass slipper situation. Ultimately, they basically stumbled in a market where they had the opportunity. And I think that's what the frustration you're seeing with so many analysts that have downgraded because of that call. You came out of that call, really feeling like this is a company that needs a compass.
Well, Dan, there was maybe a silver lining in this report, if we could call it that, with active riders at just around 20.3 million, was flat quarter over quarter, but still up nearly 9% year over year. Does that give you any hope for Lyft?
Well, I think that's the frustration, is that ridership stabilized. Those are good metrics. But if you can't do it profitably in this market, that and $3 gets you a cup of coffee. And I think that's part of the problem here, is that you got to do it profitably. And then you look at Uber, there's definitely share shifts going over there. And that's why I think Uber's watching this report, popping the champagne, because I think there's just, it's a winner take all. And really, Dara, you got to give credit, to what Uber's done. And that's why, in my opinion, to play ride sharing, you have to play Uber now. Lyft, it's almost best days are clearly in the rearview mirror.
Well, you mentioned Dara. It worked for the Eagles. They got Sirianni, turned this team around. Is it time for a new head coach at Lyft?
Look, I think the Eagles, after winning the Super Bowl Sunday, maybe should go in there as some motivational speakers. And I think, look, I think this is there's some darker days ahead here for Lyft, especially with a conference call like that.
All right, Dan, we will see you back here in a little bit. We want to talk a little Super Bowl. We don't have to ask you who you like in this game. That is clearly on display, but we will see you in a little bit. We'll also talk about Apple as well.